A very good morning to you, Marlin. You're on the other end. How are you doing this morning?
Very good, thank you, Brother Terry. Good morning to you. Well,
I'm so glad that we could connect this morning. I know we were chatting, and Marlin said, let's get on radio. So I'm glad to have you. We are going to do the next episode in this very exciting venture that Marlin and his comrades, Marlin and
yes,
his comrades are engaging in the Shepherd's Institute, and he's putting all the preps in place for that venture that we'll talk a little more about as we go down the road. But this morning, Marlon, we're going to talk about how do we nurture the environment? How do we nurture the climate that needs to be put in place to nurture the skill of being able to think well and lead well as a facilitator? So
yeah.
you talk to us a bit about why there's a need for that, and then we get into how we can pull that off. The environment that needs to surround those who engage in that venture. So talk to us about this need for good facilitation.
Well, it's a skill I think that is greatly lacking. We grew up with the idea of being lectured or lecturers or teachers, and I think there's a great disadvantage to that because it's only a one-sided teaching where I tell you what I believe and you listen to what I have to say. And it is there's no dialogue, there's no room for being challenged, there is no room for thinking through and beginning to actually digest what is being taught. And the problem often comes in where we have these situations where people will say one thing and then they will say another thing, and there's no response, there is no challenge to what is being said. As a result of that, there's no facilitator. Now, facilitation is something completely different where you are on equal grounds with the one that you are dialoguing with, rather than teacher student. I am here, you are down there, you listen to what I have to say and believe it. But in a facilitation where we see each other equally, you and I are together. We are going to journey together. You are just as important in this conversation. So it's not just about the information, it's about the transformation that is facilitation. And that is why I think it's idea in the day and age in which we live, where we can journey with people.
Okay.
So that's the long and short. Facilitation has at its heart the idea of uniting, bringing people together where, where there is this truth, or where we understand kingdom truth, for lack of a better word, where we align ourselves as we are facilitating, as we are talking. So the idea is to bring people in alignment to the truth. And that's the purpose and process of
Okay.
facilitation, rather than me just hammering you with
Okay.
information.
I like that because I see in Ephesians 4, for example, 32 verses of storyline that is so chock full of what the profile of a facilitator looks like in the context of New Testament edification. Now, I say New Testament edification because I think there is so little of what we do that follows that pattern of edification, according to 1 Corinthians 14 and Ephesians 4, for example. I see a model there that starts out with very
Correct.
minimal uh, supporting what we would call doctrines. It's just about seven of them, not 21. It's not even a statement of faith. It's not even a creed. It's not a confession. It's just 7 things. One Lord, one faith, one baptism, one God and Father over all. He's in all and through all. One Spirit, and so on. The bare minimum. And then based upon that, you have this idea where Paul injects the idea of now you need to endeavor, to work on, keep the unity of the Spirit in the bond of peace. The unity is already there, right? Now you need to endeavor to grow it and continue to nurture it. And then he goes into this talk about all of us have been gifted, right? Jesus leads captivity captive based upon the Old Testament scriptures and gives gifts to men. And in the train, he leaves gifted men. 5-fold ministry, right? Something which many conservatives are so dead scared to talk about. But it's a 5-fold ministry, which is phase 1 of edification. And they become the facilitators of the body in stage 1. And let's just talk a bit about that, because here you have gifted men that are to equip the body. You would agree that the goal is equipping the body to do what? To serve. we equip them to serve, right? So it's a very much couple of gifted men in a broadcast model, edifying and equipping. But then the whole thing shifts as these people mature. By the time you get to verse 13, there is a shift in the modality. It shifts to all member ministry. 1 to 13 is gifted men giving off. 13 to 32 is peer-on-peer mentoring within the context of ministry. But if the facilitation process hasn't happened in stage 1, guess what? It's not going to happen in stage 2, because they're not going to know what to be passing on. Peer-on-peer. In the context of the assembly. I mean, the idea is this must happen in the assembly. You will notice I don't use the word worship service, because I think that's a misnomer. I think it's an anachronism. We're reading something back into first century Christianity that didn't exist, because we say that 1 hour is what we're doing.
Worship service.
Not true.
It's not true.
So this is where I would love for you to be talking to me a lot more, talking to our listeners a lot more about the climate, the ecology that you create is what is going to help those members to come out of the cracks, those believers to come out of the cracks and start to service. So what would you say you would look for in one who shows the tendency, who shows the proclivity, who's forward-leaning in terms of becoming a good facilitator? What do you think you would look for in the very first instance?
I think the person, of course, would have to have the willingness to serve as a facilitator. That's obvious. And I think it starts with the church having that particular goal in mind. In other words, there must be something geared towards in the church where people are going to get together in order to have the facilitation process taking place. Now, I believe before the facilitation process starts, things need to be done. For instance, number 1, there needs to be prayer taking place for the facilitation. You know, this is not something that we can just come and wing. We need the Spirit of God to be able to prepare the heart of the facilitator and those who are participating in the facilitation process. So that the direct intentional prayer for that has to take place. We don't just show up without the blessing and the power and the Spirit of God leading us. Because when we think about what the spilling of the Spirit is there in Ephesians chapter 5, it's how we talk to each other. You're speaking to one another in psalms, in spiritual songs, submitting to one another in the fear of God, sharing with one another, whether it's in the home or in the family. So there has to be prayer and the power of the Spirit behind the actual uh, facilitation. And then when that begins to take place, and the last time we spoke about having the safe environment in a situation where people are free and people there's no fear of condemnation. People know that if they're going to talk, their story is not going to, ons gaan nie buite gaan, you're not going to be scandalized in the community for what you shared. And the idea is that, when there's a facilitation process taking place, I think the key is that everyone must participate. As you'll often find one or two dominating the conversation or saying the most, and then you get the two maybe being left out. And I've seen, when they get left out, they start their own little conversation on the side. But it's important that we get everybody in the group, it's in the home or in the church or even in a car, wherever this is taking place. And that's the beauty of facilitating, and happen anywhere and everywhere. You get everybody's participation, and everybody's contribution is valued.
Now
That
that's
is the
important.
wonderful thing.
Let's just stop right there, Marlon, because what you are saying there is so crucial. I think most of us got nurtured on a model that said, just shut down the guy because he's talking nonsense, right? Instead of listening for the signal in the static. I always use that illustration when your TV goes, when it freezes and goes shh, right? And the signal can't come through. Is my ear as a facilitator trained sharply enough that I can hear the signal in the midst of the noise? Because all of us talk and give off some signal, but a lot of it, what we give off is noise as well. Now, we don't think
Correct.
so because we think we're
Yes.
the preachers. And again, which
Yes.
is a very misguided model, but I must listen to him very carefully. Can I pick up the signal and say, you know what, brother, this and this and this didn't make sense to me. But what you said year and year, you see, that again shows that Marlin Saunders is listening very carefully.
Very
He's not just
important.
waiting for the guy to agree with him on every point, but he can pick up the signal in the midst of the static. And that's what it's about, right?
Yes.
Can I pick up signal in the midst of static and say,
And
bring that perspective closer? Go ahead.
I think the signal that you're talking about is the truth that is found in everybody. Look, ultimately, we would hope that the people that we're facilitating are believers. But if they're not believers, there is a measure of truth in what people say. And I think that if we can pick up on the signal, even if it's the smallest speck of truth, the idea is to get them from point A to point B. And that's the facilitation process where you will ask them questions perhaps on that one particular truth and begin to get them to discover for themselves what it is they are saying. There is a measure of truth in what you're saying, and then with one question, draw them a little closer from point B to point A. And that's the beauty of facilitation. I don't have to convince you today. There's always tomorrow. There's always the next time. If I can just move you slightly closer to Christ and the truth, to Christ and his kingdom, then I have the opportunity next time to help with the facilitation to draw you closer. And he may draw me a little bit closer to what he's saying. And then ultimately we meet together in unity in the truth. And that is the beauty of facilitation, where asking questions, finding the commonality and to draw him slowly, slowly. And it may take years, it may take months, it may take weeks. But there's nothing that says to me, I need to win this argument now, today. And I need to be seen as the one who knows it all, be right there. Because that just shuts the door to the process of facilitation.
Well,
And it,
I
it
want
leads
us,
us then to our next
yeah,
thing.
I really want us to pick that up in the next episode. Why do we have this compulsion that he must jump to where I am now? Right? This compulsion for us to do that, and that this is the one and only time. If he misses this time, he's dead in the water. Whereas what I hear from you, it's
Mm,
number one, it's process. And number two, God is in no rush. We give the impression that God is in a hurry. I mean, God, number one, always pays
mm,
his bills on time. God is never in a rush or in a hurry. He's not in panic stricken because Marlin Saunders put one foot wrong. I mean, and that's been very helpful for me. So I would really want us to pick this up next time round. That we think a lot more carefully about why do we feel so compelled to give the person all of the truth now, and the person better swallow it all now, instead of what you're saying, move him just a smidgen or a step closer to where we need to be. And so I want us to wrestle with what is the person being drawing closer to in that
yes.
facilitation process, and
Mhm.
how do you encourage that movement from A to B? What's happening between the 2 points, and how can I facilitate the movement between A and B? So we've got some
Fantastic.
good stuff here to think about, and we know Rashmon. I'm not going
No,
anywhere. My
yes.
I was in a discussion a couple of days ago where the guy said to the girl, "But where are you going? Where do you have to be?" He said, "No, no way." He says, "Why are you in such a hurry?" And I think
Uh,
as believers, we mistake urgency almost for spirituality.
yeah,
Now, I'm not saying there aren't things that are important, but we go on as if, boy, I don't have a next breath to breathe. And so
yeah,
people must be thinking according to how my clock ticks. And they're clicking according to a very different clock. But to
very
get into
much.
touch with how their clock is ticking, that's what I want us to talk about. So we we will go with where the discussion goes. We're not erratic yeah. So Marlon, thanks for your
Thank,
time. I think we
thank you
did
so much.
good here with our time management, and we'll be next time, same place, different day, with
Yes.
the next exciting episode. So thank you very much for joining us,
Thank you
Marlon.
so much, Christine. Thank
You're
you for the
welcome.
time. God
You're
bless you.
welcome. And God bless you real good, man.
Thank you.